team who have been working on this project for a long time, and also with the developer for many years and on varied projects. In terms of the responses and the scheme which has come forward, we're very proud of the high quality design which has been proposed. We have also submitted details with the application which will be part of the any forthcoming consent, rather than just relying on conditions.
Okay. Right here. Okay.
The train line.
One missing. Yep. I don't sure we've not all the questions being responded to.
Yeah, a question about the train line.
Construction, yeah.
Right.
Sorry, I missed the second part of the question. Is it relating to proximity to the train line?
Yeah, in terms of the internal construction and the design approach that you've taken to mitigate the impact of being that close to a train line?
Sure, great, thank you. So obviously from the early stages of the design, we've ensured that we are working with a relationship back to the elevated railway. Quite clearly there is a barrier between the buildings and a very highly landscaped area, lots of trees, etc. But we're not relying upon that. We're using high quality glazing, and also the way that we're stepping various elements of the internal uses back ensure that we are mitigating against the noise and the vibration that the train lines might bring. So it's very much integrated into the layout of design and also the facades.
Thank you. Thank you for your responses there. Councillor O'Brien, can you unmute your mic to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rory and Trevor, for your presentations. It was mentioned to the officer as well, one of the other members mentioned about the fact that this proposal is tenure blind, but the affordable rent is all below the 5th floor. And I was wondering if you could explain to me, because I really don't understand what additional cost and service charges there would be if it really was tenure blind and tenants of social rent properties were sharing a lift up to the 20th or 30th floor with private residents.
All right, who would respond to that question?
Well, if I'll start, Chairman, that we've when it was being designed, there were quite a few reasons, physical reasons, why the affordable units were put on the lower floors. Most of the larger units are on the lower floors, and it's easier to accommodate them there. We did have desire from the outset to ensure that all of the cores were mixed tenure. So the one option was, for example, to take the southern building and just make it all affordable housing. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to mix it in. But then you have the constraint of having the larger units, and the larger units were all being put on that side. We're informed by our affordable housing advisors that the service charge will be included within the overall rent cap, the social rent cap. And that means that that's taken into account at the time when the RSLs put forward their bids to become the partner on this particular development. And that includes within it, their original bid, the future costs of looking after their particular floors and the part of it. And the advice we got is that they would prefer to have that grouped together on the lower level, so there was any service charging relating to upper levels would not relate to them. And while the lower level service charge are paid in part by the floors above them as well. That's my understanding of it. If I've got that wrong, we'll get our affordable housing advisors to chip in.
That's fine. I really am. I'm not having a go. I'm trying to get my head around it. Can you give me an example of what an additional cost to the service charge would be for an upper floor property? Just so for instance.
I can't do that, but we've what I could do is ask some of our one of our other advisors to advise on that. It's things like the cost of the lift, for example, which has to be paid for.
But you don't pay more service charge on a lift.
Forgive me, Councillor O'Brien. Forgive me. As I said at the beginning, it's important for each speaker to complete their statement, and then we can respond to them. Okay, but if you could respond by myself. Sorry, could you just continue what you were saying?
Yeah, what I was saying is I don't know the particular costs involved, and so I can't give you an estimate of what the difference in the service charge is, other than to say that there's a higher service charge on the upper levels.
I think we'll simply accept that as a response, Councillor O'Brien. I think we accept that as a response, and this is what the applicant is saying. Okay, that its service charges are higher in the upper level. That is the response. Do you have a further question, Councillor O'Brien?
No, fine? If they don't mind, I'll just investigate later, just because I really would like to get my head around what those costs
I understand you. I understand you. But in that case, are there further questions from the committee? I don't see further indications from members. Councillor Soames.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chair. A couple of initial safeguarding questions for the applicants, and then I'd like to ask some further questions on children's space and the internal space that is in the proposal, in the application. So in terms of safeguarding against the children's space adjacent to the embankment, could you just tell us a little bit more about security measures there? And then we recognise that the proposal, the development, is in quite close proximity to Mill Wall. So in the report, it states that from South Bermondsey Station there will be a direct walkway, presumably to the stadium, which fans can take advantage of on match days. But what is there to stop them, sort of, if they arrive early, lingering down and then entering the public space within the development? And then in terms of the children's space, that's very welcomed. It's something which we've repeatedly asked officers to incorporate in the designs coming forward. But and it is welcome that you there is seemingly going to be provision for the older age group. How do you actually envisage that being sort of integrated? Are there going to be dedicated spaces for the older year groups? Yeah, if you could sort of comment on that in terms of design. And could you just tell us a little bit about the internal space? Who will ultimately be managing that? Who will be responsible for managing and maintaining that, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. There are a few questions there, so I expect between myself and Rory we'll answer various sections of them. Perhaps if I start the first one, which is the safeguarding to the railway embankment to the rear spaces. So that is actually separated off with a screen at 1.8 meters high. So it's a screen so you can get visual interaction through it. So it isn't just like a blank wall, but it certainly prevents anyone from climbing over it or getting access to the railway. Obviously, that's been a fundamental consideration throughout the whole of the early design development and into the planning application. A couple of questions regarding Millwall. Firstly, the rear of the site, where there are play spaces and also private amenity spaces, that's actually gated, so it is secure at each end, and so will be managed areas. It's also worth saying that this is a 24/7 managed building, and on match days there will be additional security and marshalling provided within the development to ensure anyone going towards the ground isn't kind of dwelling around anywhere that they shouldn't be dwelling.
In terms of the internal communal space, who will be responsible for managing that? And is that something which the socially rented tenants are going to be expected to contribute towards, please, in terms of maintenance?
Yes, it will be a centrally managed series of common areas, and we'll have to, and there'll be no contribution from the affordable tenants.
Right, yeah. Thank you.
You also asked a question about the children's play spaces and how that would be divided.
Yes.
So we have looked at a number of different options on that. So to answer your question, they will be divided, and we anticipate that there'll be a planning condition. So we'll be bringing forward more detailed proposals of that. But certainly all the areas have been put into place with all the various apparatus, etc. But it's certainly sufficient space that we can then separate those out and make them appropriate for various ages.
And thank you. And can I just sort of remind you to sort of be mindful that I wasn't only sort of thinking of potential users getting out and climbing over the screen that you propose on adjacent to the embankment, but it's also for those to mitigate against antisocial behaviour from the embankment side. Climbing over, and presumably that would be adults, potentially older teenagers, adults, etc. You know, graffiti artists, that sort of thing. I was probably more concerned about. Thank you.
Well, certainly the screen will prevent that in either direction. Actually, the embankment's actually quite hard to get to, even from the railway side. It's never impossible, of course, but the screen, which is then created at the ground level, which then protects the amenity space, is definitely there as a deterrent, and high enough that it would also be a visual and physical deterrent.
And Chair, thank you very much for that response. And Chair, I would also sort of concur. It was one of my questions that I was actually going to raise about the reduction in private amenity space in context with the present climate. And obviously that's something for us to be really conscious about going forward in terms of planning officers and applicants. And that's something that we will need to scrutinise more closely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That's duly noted, and it is quite clear we've got to pay attention to that not unimportant detail. Unless there are further questions, Councillor Newlands. Councillor Newlands, I'll take a question, but can I encourage you, please, that we need a really straightforward question, direct question, please?
Okay, in the current environment where the age of social distancing, I've already raised the point, as has Councillor Soanes just now, that there is a tremendous shortfall on public amenity space in this application. How would people living in this development be able to take their daily exercise in public open space if they had to do so, given that I think the public open space available lost the figure in front of me. Basically, it's about a third of what is required, and clearly the funds that have been paid in they're offered in lieu of public space clearly cannot possibly provide the public space in the area, given the land valuation that we see elsewhere in the documents. So how would that be provided?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Who will respond, Roy?
Yes, I'll start off, Chairman. Clearly we've designed this not with COVID-19 in mind at the time it was coming forward. This dreadful pandemic came later, but what we did do is ensure that all the units do have their own balcony, and that balcony space. The large units, which are required to have the full 10 square meters, do have so, and the rest of them do have good sized balconies, but there is a shortfall in each one of them when you get down to the two bedroom units, and that's what's been put together to create the communal space. So there is communal space in there. I don't know how we would organise to that's a private communal space for the people there, how that would be organised in people using it at different times and to keep social distancing. I honestly don't know. That would be a management challenge to us all.
Rory, I would just add to that, it isn't just a single communal space. There are 3 separate communal spaces. So there are various opportunities to put an arrangement into place. And just to kind of reaffirm Rory's point, but all units do have balcony spaces, private balcony spaces.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you. If I may, I'm going to move on now. Thank you for your presentation and responding to committee members' questions. I'm now obliged to ascertain if there is a supported room as it were, online, who lives within 100 metres of the development site. Is there such a person? And if the clerk could confirm that there is not such a person?
No one registered as a
Very good. Thank you very much. And last but not least, is there a ward councillor in this room who wishes to speak?
There is, Chair.
I think I'm familiar with that voice. Can I ask you please to introduce yourself? And I'll set up
Yes,
my...
Councillor Richard Livingstone, councillor for Old Kent Road ward.
Very good. You may begin now.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to bring out some points which haven't come up so far in the discussion. First of all, I wanted to stress something I think that's very good about this application in terms of the social housing. So not only is it policy compliant, but actually it's quite heavily weighted towards larger units. And as you know, this is something I've often brought up at committee. Whilst there's a couple of 4-bedroom units, but actually the majority of the social housing units are 3 bedrooms or above. So it's actually a very good ratio compared to many other applications. And I think that's worth bringing out and stressing. As a local ward councillor, I think one of the other real benefits of this scheme is what it's going to do in terms of the public realm in the area. I know there have been questions earlier about public space, but for those people who know that stretch of Ilderton Road, it's a pretty gritty, welcoming kind of environment at the moment. And I think what's being done in this development will improve that in terms of particularly the sort of pavement space outside the development in to the south of the station. I personally think the design is quite good. I mean, these things are always to some extent in the eye of the beholder, but I think the brickwork and things is interesting. I think it makes a positive impact on the street environment. And I think in terms of the play space and the communal space in there, again, the standards are quite high in terms of the space that's provided. Just a couple of points that haven't been picked up so far in discussion, which you might want to probe further, Chair, and committee might. I mean, obviously, one of the main things that people are going to notice about this development is the height. I mean, 28 stories is obviously shorter than other developments in the area, but it's still pretty big compared to anything else there at the moment. And whilst the officer's report covers the impact on sunlight on some of the properties that are going to be affected by it, it feels a little sparse in terms of the travellers' site to the north of the development. So the officer's report covers the impact on Delaford Road and Ablett Street properties in particular. It doesn't really talk about the Ilderton Road travellers' site. So that might be something that you want to probe further. The other thing is the local Tenants and Residents Association, Bonamy and Bramcote, although they were supportive of the scheme, they did raise a concern about parking. And obviously, I understand this is a no-car development, and that's all very good, but there isn't a CPZ in place there at the moment. And so you may want to check with officers about progress towards that and how it would be enforced in the absence of a CPZ. Just finally, to catch up on a couple of points, Councillor Soames raised the point about Millwall. I mean, this has been a discussion that as ward councillors had a number of times with the developers about it all, and we were worried at one point that that the back area might become a convenient stopping off place post-match for various people. That's been designed out. So, I mean, there's been some good work done to try and design some of those ASB issues out.
Your time is up now. Your time's up. Thank you. Are there any questions for Councillor Richard Livingstone? Can't see any questions.
Chair.
Councillor Soames, yes. Go ahead.
If you may, if I may rather. Richard, could you say just a little bit more about the Travellers' site, and have you had conversations with them regarding this development? Have they been consulted, and if so, what are their views regarding the application, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I understand they have been consulted. I've not had contact with them myself. I mean, it's been slightly complicated by the fact that part of the site was decanted temporarily during this period. So they may not have all been easy to get hold of, but I do understand from the applicants they have reached out to all of them. I've not had any feedback from them at all. I mean, although number 41 Ilderton Road, which is the nearest site I know, is occupied by a pensioner. So I don't know to what extent, maybe the applicants can tell us more about this, or somebody can, about what impact there has been on him, and what discussions there might have been with him in terms of those sort of overshadowing issues.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Stone, for your response. Are there further questions from committee members? If not, thank you, Councillor Stone, for your presentation. Thank you very much indeed. I'll now move on. Are there further broad questions the committee wishes to ask, if I may ask, first of all? If not, any comments you wish to make, we should take into account. In that case, then, I've got a message here. I think I've taken Councillor Newens already. In that case, I'd like to move to the motion, but I note that there is an amendment to condition 25 in the addendum report. I should bring to your attention, and I just want to refer to it now whilst I'm doing this. So, okay, got that right. So, notwithstanding the amendment in the addendum report, I'm happy that I go to the motion. I'll put a motion forward as recommended by officers. Set out in pages 1 to 2 of the report and pages 17 of the agenda pack, and note the amendment in the addendum report. Councillor Newen, are you seconding the motion? Did I get that from you, or I'm seeing messages on my screen? Who would like to second the motion?
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Brien. Can I now go to the roll call? Councillor Kath Whittam.
For, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barry Hargroves.
For, Chair.
Councillor Adele, forgive me, Hamish McCullum.
For, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Margie Newens. Councillor Margie Newens. Unmute your mic, Councillor Newens.
Sorry, yeah, no, I lost. I lost. I couldn't come in. I'm going to abstain on this.
You wish to abstain? Forgive me, Councillor. That's fine. You're abstaining. I've got a note of that. Councillor Damien O'Brien.
For, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Catherine Rose.
For, Chair.
Councillor Cleo Soames.
For, Chair.
I can also confirm that I'm for the motion. The motion is carried. I want to thank all contributors to tonight's meeting, and I understand the first item was rather tricky, but we've successfully completed our first virtual planning meeting.
Chair,
yes.
I'm really sorry. Before we formally complete it, can I just raise one issue which I'm so sorry I didn't notice at the beginning of the meeting, but it just relates to the minutes of the meeting on the 3rd of March. I've noticed.
I think we've approved those minutes.
I realised that, Chair, but I've realised that that the minutes failed to record the fact that myself and Councillor Jane Salmon were present at the meeting.
Oh gosh! All right. Is the clerk handy?
Yes, Chair. Obviously, in light of this information, we can bring those particular minutes back to the next meeting to be approved again with that amendment, if councillors agree.
I'm content to do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I trust the committee is content. In that case, and again, I want to conclude by saying thank you for completing what was I believe, a successful first virtual meeting of the Southwark Planning Committee. I know the issues are always difficult for us to determine, but we have successfully completed our mission. I want to thank all contributors, and I look forward to meeting you in the next round.
Well
Thank
done,
you very
Chair.
much. Good night to
Well
you.
done to you,
And we
Chair.
don't-
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.